Malawi as a country has got a number of international as well as regional trade agreements. To tackle this today, my guest is Johanna Leblanc. Johanna is a former U.S. staffer at the United States of America Congress who was involved in trade matters between America and other nations. Now, to join me today, Johanna is here to express more on the trade agreements that Malawi as well as other countries are able to engage. Johanna, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Johanna, how can African companies be of capacitance to take advantage of AGOA?
Well, first and foremost, the reality is that what we do have is the AGOA, and it's a trade preference program, which gives certain preference to companies that are importing and exporting certain goods. But one of the things that we have seen over the past decade or so, even since the inception of this trade preference program, is that it is gravely underutilized, right? And some of the major beneficiaries of this program are South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and a few others. So we've seen countries like Malawi has not really been able to fully utilize the trade preference program for economic growth. And I think that, it is incredibly important for SMEs to understand what the program is and how they could do business under it in terms of exporting goods into the United States. For example, you all have the chombo fish, right, which is unique to Malawi. Nobody else has the chombo fish, and I am confident U.S. consumers would love to have a taste of the chombo fish. So understanding how to utilize the AGOA trade preference program to export goods such as the chombo fish into the United States market is pivotal to achieving economic sustainability.
In light with this utilizing trade agreements, Johanna, how can the U.S. help African countries to build capacity to meet sanitary and phytosanitary standards so that they can be able to sell their products, especially agricultural products? And as you know, that Malawi accounts for most of these agricultural products to 80% of its GDP export revenues. Johanna, what's your take on that?
The word help indicates that someone is much more disadvantaged than the other. What I like to see what I like to use is more so collaboration and cooperation, right? Because the reality is that the African continent feeds the entire world with raw minerals, right? From the cell phones that we use to the cars that we drive here in America and in the Western world. So minerals and resources coming out of the African continent are significant for us to have a productive world, a world that can thrive. So what I think should happen is that in terms of ensuring that goods coming out of different parts of Africa meet the sanitary standards of U.S. consumers or U.S. laws, is you have FDA, right, which is the Federal Drug Administration. That also plays a role. You have the Department of Labor here in the United States, and I'm sure they're already doing this, but making sure that they're connecting through the U.S. Embassy with SMEs and government agencies. And to provide the tools and the steps to ensure that when those products leave, for example, Malawi, they are in a condition that could be consumed by Americans based on our international and domestic law.
As Malawi, we have met most of the international standards that you have highlighted there. And we have a lot of minerals here in Malawi, a lot of mineral deposits here in Malawi. As you have learned that very soon we are going to start a serious mining here in Malawi. We have got mineral deposits of gold, uranium, rare earth, as well as oil and gas. and so many more. What can the Malawi government do to attract the investments, like the investors from the US and other countries to come and invest here in Malawi? What's your take, Johanna?
Yeah, I think, first, you have, as a state, there's a great responsibility for the Malawian government to spend money on advertisement, right, and tourism, and to attract investors into Malawi. You and I both know Malawi is one of the most amazing countries in Africa. I've lived in Malawi. I lived in Lilongwe for about 3 months. Malawi is a very peaceful country, which is incredibly important for investors, right? Because when investors are thinking about where should I go to invest, one of the things that they look at is there stability in that country, right? So Malawi already meets that one element. Secondly, is there political stability in the country? Because as governments change, sometimes as a company, you can lose money, right? Because the new government may say, I no longer want to do business with this company, right? And in terms of democracy, some would argue that Malawi is a democratic country, right? And then you have the rule of law investors look at. Is there a judicial system that is available in the case that litigation were to arise, that I would get a free, I will be heard, and that I know that there won't be any type of biases that exist within the judiciary. And I think Malawi meets all three elements. Now, are there challenges that exist within Malawi's judiciary? Absolutely, just like there are challenges that exist within the United States judiciary. But I think overall, the main thing that investors look at before they go into a country, once they know that money can be made, because at the end of the day, investors don't go into countries because they're in love with the country's culture. They love the country itself. They go into a country because they know there could be a return on their investment, right? So all the elements are met. So I think that the Malawian government has to work with public relations firm to promote some of the sectors that exist in Malawi as a way to attract investors, and also provide success stories. What companies have come into Malawi in the mining sector, and what were their successes, right? And I know sometimes, countries achieve amazing milestones, right? They have great stories of the diaspora coming in, investing, and other companies coming and investing and doing incredibly well. But that is not always articulated properly. So that is an important key.
Now, Johanna, as you have stated that it's a necessity for a country to be at peace so that investors can come in. Now, most African countries require support to build infrastructure, such as projects such as roads, energy, agriculture, commercialization, etc., for them to enhance their productivity and growth. Do you think the US is doing enough to support Africa in this area?
Absolutely. So right now, one of the priorities of the Biden administration is actually infrastructure, energy, agriculture, healthcare, as well as finance. So with the United States Development Corporation here in the United States, and also known as the DFC, there is debt financing available for companies that want to engage in business in Malawi, right? Let's say, for example, there's an existing hospital that is owned by the private sector in Malawi and that has been operating for quite some time and has done really well. And that hospital wishes to expand, but they need an additional, let's say, $5 million, right? So they will go to DFC and make that request, right? And assuming they meet the requirements, they could potentially be approved for debt financing for the particular project, right? But that is purely for private sector, right? And because, as you know, with financial institutions, they want to make sure they get a return on their investment as well. And they tend to have much more confidence in the private sector to do so. And also there is USTDA, United States Trade Agency here in the United States, that provides grants for feasibility studies before you can even start construction, right? So these opportunities exist, but it's a matter of making sure that the population is aware of these various opportunities. And also, as it relates to the government wanting to perhaps expand infrastructure itself, again, diplomatic relations between countries is about quid pro quo. You give and I take, right? So making sure that when engaging with the U.S., because I'm sure the U.S. has certain asks of Malawi government. For example, the U.S. government may have asked the Malawian government to take a certain vote at the United Nations, right? And you can negotiate, right? If the U.S. wants this vote, perhaps let's negotiate on maybe $10 million for the construction of a road, right? So there are a lot of ways around it, right? And I think that governments have to get creative, and they have to reassess the relationship with their Western partners. And it should not be a relationship where one benefits more. Everyone should benefit, in particular, the people of Malawi. But I also think there's incredible opportunities for intra-trade Africa through the African Continental Free Trade Area as well. And governments across the continent have supported this free trade area. And we need to ensure that, AGOA does not undermine AFCFTA, and that AGOA complements the AFCFTA to ensure job creation and infrastructure projects. Because when you're talking about intra-trade Africa, you're going to have to transport goods from one part of the country to the other. Yes, so you're going to need a great deal of infrastructure for that.
Now, Johanna, what's your analysis on U.S. engagement strategies in Africa? Can you evaluate the efficacy of developmental approaches in fostering regional partnership and economic growth?
Yeah, I think there are enormous opportunities for the United States to strengthen its relationship with various countries across the African continent. And it is something that is necessary as the U.S. likes to maintain its posture as the global leader in the world. I think that comes with an immense level of pressure and obviously commitment by the United States government as it relates to different countries. So I think it is country specific. Countries have to assess their needs and what they're getting from various partners, right? And at the end of the day, make that final decision. But as I said earlier, I wish to reiterate, I think there are enormous opportunities for the U.S. government to strengthen relations and to further show its footprint across the African continent. I mean, the population is growing rapidly, a population of 1.4 billion people, with the youngest population in the world, with an average age of 18.8. That is significant. I always say this: Africa's greatest resources is its people, is its youth. And the U.S. to a certain extent has committed to Africa's youth by the illustration of the Washington Mandela Fellowship Program, where the U.S. selects some of the best and brightest young leaders across the African continent, and they come to the United States to further their studies for an extended period of time, and then return back to their country to serve, right? So these are some of the examples of what the U.S. has done to foster better relationships with various countries, but there's certainly more that should be done in the areas of infrastructure, energy, healthcare, and financial inclusion, certainly.
Now, lastly, Johanna, just a quick thought. What should we, what should we take on AGOA and AFT as Africa? Finally, your last thought before we close. What do you think should be done?
I think that as the United States Congress is thinking about renewing AGOA, the U.S. Congress should also ensure that AGOA does not undermine the AFCFTA, and that it further strengthens the AFCFTA. It is an important trade agreement for the African continent that is going to lift millions of people out of poverty, and that is going to create countless jobs in various sectors across the continent. It is something that heads of states are incredibly proud of, and they have shown that they're committed by signing the various instruments. We saw that recently Botswana announced that it is now officially doing business under the AFCFTA. That is a good step in the right direction. We know there are barriers when it comes to the implementation of this, right? Again, infrastructure is one of them, the transportation of goods from one part of the continent to the other, right? And of course, you have the visa issue, the border issue, right? Where you can't just get up and travel to just any African country that you want to.
That's how we end this week's edition of Unpacked. I was talking to Johanna Leblanc. Johanna is a former staffer at the United States Congress who was in charge of Africa trade-related issues with America. And Johanna is also a partner at Adomi PLLC Group. My name is Ghwabupi. Until next week, I say keep watching Unpacked and goodbye.